Akio, and I am the CEO and founder of BLAQUE Kansas City. BLAQUE KC stands for Black Leaders Advancing Quality Urban Education. We are a nonprofit 501c4 organization. Our mission is to significantly improve the academic, economic, social, emotional, and life outcomes of African American children in public schools. We will change the odds for African American children through widespread community engagement, leveraging the collective social, human, and economic capital as fuel to drive our BLAQUE Playbook. You can find more details of our BLAQUE Playbook on our website at www.blaquekc.com. And now, we are super excited to bring to you the nuts and bolts of how to run for school board here in our metropolitan Kansas City. Candidate Classroom is all about helping passionate people learn how to run for office. This month is a deep dive on local school boards. For those of you who are already excited and know that you're going to run for office in April, we have in January a 2-day deep dive that teaches you all the mechanics of actually running a campaign. We also provide a track for campaigners. So if you're interested in supporting a really great candidate and helping them cross the finish line, this 2-day training will feature opportunity for you to learn all the mechanics of how to run a successful campaign. We believe by building the capacity of great candidates and great campaigners that together we can help you serve on some of the most important boards in our city. So why does school boards matter? We think it's important as you start on this journey to consider running for a school board seat that you hear from the one employee that you all have, which is a superintendent. We've gathered together 3 phenomenal superintendents: Dr. Mark Bedell, Superintendent of Kansas City Public Schools; Dr. Yolanda Cargile, Superintendent of Center Public School District; and Dr. Jason Strickland, Superintendent of Hogan Preparatory Academy. We want you to hear from them why school boards matter.
Good morning. My name is Mark Bedell, Superintendent of the Kansas City Public School District. I've had the honor over the last 5 years, or 4.5 years or so, of being able to work with 9 at one point 9 board members and now 7 dynamic community members who are mission driven to help advance the academic outcomes of students. As you all know, it is critical that we have elected board members who are focused on the social, emotional, and academic progress of every single scholar that they represent. And in the Kansas City Public School District, we've been able to do that. The way that I view a board to superintendent relationship is one that is through authenticity, one that is focused on board goals, that's focused on strategic plan goals, and then that is also focused on interweaving all of those into the superintendent's evaluation. Therefore, it allows for us to have a continuous focus on those 3 outcomes, which is the primary reason why we all do what we do. So as I think about working with future board members, I think that collaboration is the most critical aspect of it. Secondly, we have to be able to build a relationship. We have to be honest with each other. It isn't about the superintendent showing everybody what he or she can do, but more so us working together in a collaborative manner. The 4 areas that I often talk about that board members have a responsibility for is to ensure that you are hiring and evaluating a superintendent, that you are responsible for approving a budget, that you are responsible for writing, revising, and eliminating policies that may no longer be relevant, and then most importantly, governance, ensuring that all of the district, the entire entity of the school district is being protected. And so we're looking forward to working with any of our community members who want to come on as a board member here in the Kansas City Public School District to help them to assimilate into what we have, but more importantly, bring in a new style, a new way of looking at things, because that is what will allow for our school systems to continue to prosper. So that's pretty much what I have to offer. I'm very thankful, looking forward to elections here in the next few months. And I'm hoping that as you all make this decision, that you realize you have a tremendous amount of power in your hands to change the lives of the children that you serve?
Why school boards matter. School boards matter because you have the opportunity to select a superintendent. You play a key role in selecting the superintendent who will lead and carry out the district's mission and vision, being able to implement policy that the board approves to best serve children and families. Boards of education serve as ambassadors for the district, having that direct connection to community, being able to share about the work that's being done and the future work that the board and district level leaders are planning to continue to enhance the learning experiences for children. Members of the board also serve as advocates for children and staff. And to ensure that there is a continuous laser-like focus on academic achievement within the organization, as well as supporters of the work. Supporters of the work of the superintendent, district level leaders, as well as staff and the district. Supporters of the work to ensure that children and families have what they need to continue to grow and learn, be critical thinkers, and have all of the tools and skills that they need beyond high school to be a functioning member of society. And so I simply would like to thank you for considering this very important role. As superintendent in Center School District, I absolutely appreciate being able to collaborate with the Board of Education to serve children. My why around the work is creating the absolute best learning experiences for children and the absolute best place to work for staff, and I cannot do that alone.
Hello everyone, my name is Jason Strickland and I am the superintendent of Hogan Prep Academy. I have the privilege of sharing some thoughts with you today about the importance of school boards. There is a tradition in an African village where the people greet each other with the saying, "How are the children?" The desired response is, "The children are well." See, the people in this village know that if the children are well, the whole village is well. Well, I would present to you and argue that children are the absolute most important resource and asset of a community. When the children are doing well, the community is well. School boards are charged with taking care of the children. They are charged with taking care of the community's most important resource. They do that through their leadership, through their financial oversight, through their academic performance oversight, through their community engagement, through their partnerships, and a whole lot of other things that school boards must consistently do, all for the sake of taking care of the children. So it cannot be overestimated or overstated how important the work school boards must do consistently, because they are taking care of the community's most important resource. So I encourage all school boards to do well, to stay committed, and I thank them for their hard work because they are taking care of the community's most important resource.
And now, to provide some context for our discussion today, we want to begin to talk about the Kansas City educational landscape. Today is the beginning of a series of dialogues that we will take to have a deeper dive to understand why districts are reporting their academic outcomes the way that they are. I would encourage you, I know you'll have questions, please use the chat box to place your questions in the chat box. Those questions will start to guide and frame our deep dive of data conversations by districts starting in February of 2021. So now, let's get into the Kansas City educational landscape. As we look at performance in Missouri, it's important for us to just provide some additional language and context. Findings presented here today are from school and district level data that was provided to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, better known as DESE. DESE is the governing body of all schools and school districts in the state of Missouri. This data is reported directly from schools, and DESE makes this data publicly available on their website. The data in this presentation does not include private or parochial schools, which are religious-based schools. It's important to note that. Annually, public schools are required to administer the Missouri Assessment Program, or a MAP test, in March or April. The MAP test is a way to measure the academic performance of students across schools as compared to grade level expectations for that respective grade. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to disaggregate student performance by race, ethnicity, and income. Now, when we look at Missouri performance data, there are a few important aspects to consider. Missouri has 4 performance levels. Below basic, which means students are multiple grade levels behind. Basic, students may be 1 or so grade level behind. Proficient, student is on grade level. And advanced, that means the student is ahead of their grade level. All performance data in this presentation are presented as the percentage of students who are proficient and above. So I want you to know, when we talk about the percentage of students that are proficient or above, we're talking about students that are on grade level or ahead of their grade level. Missouri assesses students in grades 3 through 8 in high school. So our presentation will look at the percentage of students who are on grade level or ahead in grades 3 through 8 in high school. When we talk about our graduation rate data, it's presented as the percentage of students who graduate on time. That's a student that graduates within 4 years. Okay, so we're gonna start very, very broad, looking at our state performance, then Jackson County, then we'll drill down a little layer deep. Okay, so who do we serve in Jackson County? This slide is looking at from 1998 to 2019. On the left, you will see the percentage of students that identify as Black, as Latino, as white, the percentage of students that are designated as English language learners, and the percentage of students that are identified with a disability. So you can see that in 2019, 31% of the students in Jackson County identified as Black. 15% of those students identified as Latino, 46% identified as white, 9% of all students in Jackson County are English language learners, and about 11% of students in Jackson County are students with a disability. So now we're going to take a level deeper and we're going to start to look at performance across a few school districts. Now, I know when you look at this slide, you're thinking, Cokeithia, that's a lot of data. But let me help orient you to the slide first before we unpack it. This slide is looking at English language arts performance. Remember, the MAP scores are looking at students 3 through 8 and high school. Now, on this left-hand side, or your vertical axis, is the percentage of proficiency. On the horizontal axis, you'll see all students, then you'll start to see a breakout by race. White students, Black students, Latino student performance, and then low-income students. It's important to note that low-income students will be a blend of Latino, Black, and white when we look at low-income students, right? Now let's talk about the color of the bars. The blue is data collected from the state of Missouri. The green is Jackson County. The gold is Blue Springs. The red is Lee Summit. Then you'll see the next is KCPS. You'll see the purple as charter schools. This bluish color is Hickman Mills. The green represents Grandview, and the brown represents Independence, right? So now let's go and let's just unpack for all students, starting with the first blue line. Remember, that's Missouri. So in the state of Missouri, 49% of all students are proficient, meaning on grade level or advanced. So that's almost 50%, right? We know that that is not a high academic bar. We want to see something like 100% or 90% over time. So that is roughly almost 5 out of every 10 kids, 5 are on grade level. When we take a look at Jackson County, that's a little bit lower than the percentage of proficiency for the state of Missouri. About 46% of kids in Jackson County are on grade level or ahead. Now, let's look at this gold bar. That's Blue Springs. So 67% of all students in Blue Springs, which is outperforming the state and Jackson County, they are on grade level or advanced. So that's about almost close to 7 out of 10 kids are on grade level. Lee Summit, slightly lower, but still outperforming, right, the state and Jackson County when we look at the percentage of students that are proficient. We come down and we look at Kansas City Public Schools, 25%. So 25% of all students, 2 out of 10, are on grade level or advanced. Come over, let's look at charter schools. 35%, and charter schools are all the charter schools within the boundaries of Kansas City Public Schools. Their data aggregated together. All students, 35%. So that's roughly 3 out of 10 students on grade level. We come over and we look at Hickman Mills. Again, 23%, 2 out of 10 students are on grade level or advanced. Grandview, 37%, slightly higher, right? 3 out of every 10 students in Grandview are on grade level or advanced. And then Independence, 45%, less than half of students in Independence are on grade level or advanced. We tend to always look at, all students when we are looking at performance of districts. And so you can see that you can say, oh my gosh, look, 67%, we're outperforming the state, we're doing a great job. And they are, and we are proud of that. But we also need to unpack and see, how does this shake out when we start to disaggregate the data by race, right? So again, white students, Black students, Latino students, low income. You can see pretty quickly, right, when you just look with your eyes that Black students are having the lowest performance outcomes as measured by the map across districts. So just for example, let's take Blue Springs. 71% of white students, which is higher than their average of all students, are proficient, 7 out of 10, right? Now, but look at the proficiency rate for Black students in Blue Springs. 45%. So 4 out of 10 Black students in Blue Springs are on grade level compared to 7 out of 10 of their white peers. Let's look at Latinos. Slightly outperforming Black students in Blue Springs, 60%, 6 out of every 10. And then low-income students hovering about 53%. Half of low-income students in Blue Springs are proficient, meaning they're on grade level or advanced. Now, let's move to the next slide. This next slide is looking at math performance. Remember the previous slide, we looked at English language arts. The slide orientation is the same. Vertical axis, percentage of proficiency. Horizontal, all students, white students, Black students, Latino students, low income. Do we see these same trends pretty much holding true across? Yes, we see that Black students are experiencing the lowest performance outcomes, academic outcomes across districts. Across districts, that's important because we're looking at as compared to the state and Jackson County. The average proficiency scores 42%. So that means out of all the students in the state of Missouri, only 42% of our students in the state are proficient on grade level or advanced in math, right? When we look at Jackson County, slightly different. Come back up, let's look at Blue Springs. These are all students, right? But now let's start to look as we disaggregate by race. So when we look at the state of Missouri for Black students, it's 18%. So only 18% of black students in the state of Missouri are proficient, 1 out of every 10, right? When we look at Jackson County, 21%, slightly higher than the state, but still very low, 21%, guys. All right, let's look at Blue Springs. 41% compared to 71% of white students, black students are on grade level. Blue Springs has the highest for ELA and math when we look at black student proficiency, right? So let's come down and let's look at, as we start to look at Lee Summit, 33%, right? So Lee Summit, for their white students, 64%, 6 out of every 10 white students are on grade level. So look at that for black students, right? 33%, half the rate, right? Let's come and look at KCPS, 14%, 1 out of every 10. Charter schools, slightly outperforming here, 30%. 3 out of every 10 students are proficient on grade level or advanced at charter schools. But when we look at compared to their white peers in charters, here they are. 70% of white students in charter schools are proficient. They are nearly neck and neck with Blue Springs, right? So we're looking saying, wow, that's really great. Now let's come and look at, does that hold true for black students and Latino students? So come over to Latino students in charter schools, 29%. Almost 3 out of every 10 students are proficient. And then we look at our low income students, 28%. Same thing when we look at KCPS, 14%, 1 out of 10. Come over and let's look at Latino students in KCPS, right? 24%, 2 out of every 10 students. So you guys are starting to get the hang of it, right? Data can be fun and exciting and actually easy to interpret once you get oriented to the slides. So now, let's go a little bit deeper. Before we've compared academic performance in English language arts and math when we looked at Jackson County or the state. Now we're going to look just at a school district's performance as compared to the state. So now let's look and orient ourselves with the slide. Again, vertical axis, this is the percentage of proficiency. Now as we look across our vertical axis, the peach is all students. The white, our students are in gray. Black students are identified with the black color. Blue students are representing Latino, and green is representing low income. On your left-hand side, this is the state of Missouri. On your right-hand side, these are the academic performance of Blue Springs. So let's look. Again, this will be constant on all the slides. When we look at all students in the state of Missouri, 49%. Less than half of the students are on grade level. For white students, a little bit more than half of all white students are on grade level or advanced. For black students, 25%, right? Black students in the state of Missouri are on grade level. 39% for Latino students in the state of Missouri, 39%, almost 4 out of every 10 Latino students are on grade level, and then low income, 35%. Now let's look at how Blue Springs compares to the state. All students, 67%. White students, 71% of all white students in Blue Springs are on grade level. When we look at our black students, our Latino students, and low income, you can see that there's a stark disparity between white students and minority students and low income. 45% of all black students, 4 out of every 10. 60% Latino students are doing really well here. 6 out of every 10 Latino students are on grade level. And then low income, 53%. Let's look at our charter schools, right? This doesn't change. This is the state compared against the state of Missouri. All students, 35%, right? And then when we think about white students, 75% of all white students are proficient on grade level or advanced as we look at academic performance. Then we see again 30%, 29%, and 30%. Now, charter schools serve largely African American and Latino students. This represents about 800 white students, so still a sizable amount of students, but I just wanted to notate that, proportionally charter schools are serving more African American and Latino kids. So we've got some work to go to catch up and to close these performance gaps. All right, let's move along. And now let's look at Grandview. Again, we're looking at English language arts and reading performance for Grandview as we compare it to the state. Again, the state data does not change. Now let's look at Grandview. All students in Grandview, there's 37% of all their students are on grade level, right? Compared to 50% of white students. So almost half, 5 out of every 10 white students in Grandview are on grade level. For black students, it's 31%, 3 out of every 10. Slight uptick for Latino students and for low-income students. So I hope you guys are starting to see that these trends throughout school systems, right? So now, let's see, does it hold up the same for math? We just covered ELA performance, but let's look at a different set of schools as we look at math performance and drill down for a little bit. Again, I know this is a lot of data to take in, and this is just to start a conversation. We will spend time in February unpacking the data and the rationale by districts. So again, the state average is 42% of all students in the state of Missouri are on grade level or advanced. When we look at white students in the state of Missouri, 48% are on grade level or advanced in math. When we look at black students, 18%, 1 out of every 10, almost 2. Latino students, 33% of all Latino students in the state are on grade level or advanced. And low income, 28% of students are on grade level or advanced. Now, when we think about the work that schools and communities are doing to increase diversity in STEM fields, engineering, technology, computers, we need a strong math background. So I want you to know that that can potentially, hurt our chances of diversifying these fields when we have student performance this low. Now, let's look at Lee Summit. Again, 58% of all students are on grade level in math in Lee Summit. When we disaggregate and look at white students, 64% of all white students on grade level are advanced in Lee Summit. When we look at our black students, about 33% of black students are on grade level or advanced. So when you look at that, that's 30 percentage points different, right? When we saw in Lee Summit a year or so ago, these equity conversations unfold with Dr. Carpenter as he was trying to push for more equity training. And we can see why. Look at the academic performance of African Americans, Latino, and low-income students compared to their white peers. And this is in math. So now let's look at independence. Remember, the state stays the same, doesn't change, right? Come back over, let's look at independence. This is all students. 35% of all students in independence are on grade level or advanced. That's only 3 out of every 10 students, guys. 3 out of every 10. Now we come over and look at white students. Slightly outperforming all students, but still 42%, less than half of white students are on grade level or advanced. We've got work to do. And again, you can see this stark kind of drop in academic performance outcomes for black students, 18%, 1 out of every 10, almost 2. Then we look at Latino students, 29% and also 29% in low income. So hovering about 3 out of every 10 students. Now let's look at KCPS. When we look at Kansas City Public Schools, again, here's their comparison to the state. Doesn't change. 21% of all students are on grade level as it relates to math. They are on grade level or advanced, 21%, 2 out of every 10. Come over here and look at white students. 46%, almost half of white students are on grade level or advanced. Now it's important to note here that KCPS largely serves students that are African American and Latino and low income. So there's not a huge population of white students here, but it's still 46%. Then when we start to look at students that are black, that are Latino, that are low income, right? We see a slight uptick, but still very much half of the percentage points that we see for white students, right? We got work to do as a community. Now, let's take a step back and let's look at our Jackson County graduation rate. You got a chance to see academic performance in ELA, English Language Arts, reading, and math. right? Now, we know that those good foundational skills are what helps a student be successful. We know that at third grade, you start to see students who have been learning how to read, use reading as a tool to continue to foster learning. So how are graduation rates looking when we disaggregate them by race? It's important to know when we talk about graduation rates, again, we're talking about students that graduated within 4 years. So if a student was retained, if a student had to repeat, they are not counted in this graduation rate as on time. Now, let's orient ourselves to the slide, right? Percentage of students that are graduating. When we look across our horizontal axes, we're looking at years 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Now, let's talk about the bars here. The blue bar is going to represent graduation rate for all students, right? So we can see from 2015 to 2019, we see somewhat of an uptick in graduation rates, but for the last 3 years have been pretty consistent. Around 89% of all students in Jackson County are graduating within 4 years. Now let's look at that same rate for white students. So when you look at white students, you see that 94%, 9 out of 10 white students are graduating within 4 years. Okay, now let's look at the graduation rate for black students. That's the goal. You can see that there's been a slow and steady uptick and then really kind of leveling off these past years at 83%. 83% of black students are graduating within 4 years. Only 83% as compared to the state average of 89 or white students at 94%. Now let's look at our Latino students. You can see that there's been an increase, right? This is this red bar. There's been an increase in graduation rates for Latinos. That's really good. We're starting to see an uptick over the last year from 2018 to 2019 with 87% of students graduating within 4 years. So you can see that the trends that we started with and the trends that we see in our graduation rates are holding true. African American students are faring the worst out of every major subgroup across school systems, across high performing and low performing, across all school systems. We are seeing that African Americans and Latino and low income students are not having those same outcomes. Now, I want to shift our thinking just a little bit, just to take a deeper dive. And I want to talk about the bottom 5% of the state. So there are roughly about 2,000 school districts in the state of Missouri. Every year, the state looks at the 100 schools that fall with scores in the bottom 5%. So 5% out of 2,000 school districts is 100, right? So 100 schools that have the lowest performance outcomes in ELA and math. This slide will show you that if we just look at the schools, within the boundaries of Kansas City Public School System, both district and charter, we're looking at years 2010, 2016, 17, 18, and 19. And what I want you to understand is in 2010, when we look at the lowest performing 100 schools, which is the bottom 5% scores and the bottom 5% of the state, 35% of those schools were in the boundaries of Kansas City Public School District. It's 35 schools out of 100 across the state with the lowest performance scores. When we look at math, 30%, 30 schools within this tight geographical boundary. But the great thing is that with all the community engagement and leadership and resources and philanthropy, we begin to chip away at that. So in 2019, we have only 19% of those schools that rank in the bottom scores of ELA and only 14. So 19 and 14 schools in 2019 compared to almost double that for math, right? So there's good work underway. But on a more of a somber note, when we look at those schools, district and charter, that score in the bottom 5% of the state for ELA and math, we find that those schools are at least 90% low income, or they're 90% black in student population, or at least 90% minority. So we see that this represents about 5,500 kids, 5,500 largely minority and low-income students are in schools that rank in the bottom 5% of the state. We've got work to do. We've got work to do. So some key takeaways. I know this was a lot of data, so I just want to give you guys some key takeaways. When we talk about race and equity, it is very important. As you can see, we start to really look at those trends in academic performance. What we see is an ELA, math, and science across the entire county. Black children have substantially lower odds of being on grade level than any other group of students. In ELA, for example, a white student is 2.25 times more likely to be on grade level than a black student. In 2019, we had over 776 students who did not graduate on time. They either dropped out or it took them more than 4 years to complete a high school diploma. Of those students, 47% were black. 363 students. Yet only 30% of our students that are black are in high school. So only 30% of the population of high school students in 2019 were black, but 47% of those represented the dropout, or it took them longer to complete a high school degree. And again, when we look at all of our black 12th graders, over 60% of them are nestled in 8 high schools in Jackson County. When we look at these 8 high schools and their graduation rate, they're 10 percentage points lower than the all-student average, right? 10 percentage points lower. So the main takeaway from here is, one, I wanted to just level set as we start to go into this discussion about what is happening in our broader educational ecosystem. I also want to tell you that this is one of the single largest reasons that I started Black. It is because we need to name that black students across our metro area are not faring on par with their white counterparts. So I know that there's been attempts to make it against quality school versus non-quality, district versus charter, suburban versus urban, rural versus suburban. That's pointless. Those are artificial binary options, and it doesn't matter. As you can see in our data across Blue Springs, Lee Summit, Independence, Grandview, KCPS charters, none of our school systems, none of them are delivering quality academic outcomes for minority students, specifically black students. And so we have got to be bold. We've got to be courageous to have conversations about race, about equity, about academic achievement. And we got to be uncomfortable with this data, so much so that we say enough is enough. And we've got to all work together in partnership with superintendents and school leaders and parents to change these odds for our kids. And just so you know, all kids are not doing well, right? Yes, white kids are outperforming black and Latino kids, but they are still not at the level of academic performance that their parents hope and dream for them as well, right? So it takes all of us working together. Now, this data would not be possible without the folks at School Smart Kansas City. I would like to thank Noah Devine, Director of Educational Investments, for working to help Black compile this data and present it in a way that I hope was easy to understand. Again, this is a data conversation. It is the start. And we know that academic assessments are not the holistic picture of teaching and learning. This is not an attack on school districts, and it's not an attack on our educators that are showing up each and every day to deliver their best. This is about the educational system. Something in our educational system is unintentionally harming Black and Latino kids across school systems. And it is up to us as folks who care about kids, who want all kids to succeed and do well, to help these school districts close these performance gaps. Now, We're going to take a slight transition. We've kind of level set about the data and what's happening in our broader educational system. But as we start to think about school boards, this is why school boards are important. You serve as the governor of these school systems. You all need to be picking apart your data and having conversations and working in tandem with the community and the superintendent to deliver the resources and the social and political capital for superintendents to do their jobs, right? So as we start to pivot to school boards and the requirements for school boards, and what does it mean when we hear this terminology like boundaries, at-large districts versus in districts, we wanted to start to provide some definitions for you. So you will see a video in which we take the Kansas City Public School District and we start to define for you what does it mean around boundaries, around elected officials, sub-districts, and at-large. We want you to be able to see how these terms really play out when we talk about our political landscape within the boundaries of a school district. Next, you will hear from Murray Woodard as he starts to talk about what are the requirements for running for school board. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to the Kansas City, Missouri Public School District.
Within the boundaries of our district, there are 5 sub-districts.
Each sub-district has an elected official, and there are 2 elected members serving their district at large.
Let's take a look at all the sub-districts.
Sub-District 1 is currently held by Rita Cortez. This seat is up for re-election. The boundaries are 31st Street to 85th Street, State Line Road to Oak.
Sub-District 2, Nate Hogan. Boundaries are Independence Avenue to 41st Street, Southwest Traffic Way to Lister Avenue.
Sub-District 3, Manny Abarca. This seat is up for re-election. The boundaries are State Line Road to Blue Ridge Boulevard, Front Street to 17th Street.
Sub-District 4, Dr. Marvia Jones. Boundaries, Mill Creek Parkway to Northern Ave, East 63rd to East Truman Road.
Sub-District 5, Mark Wasserstrom. This seat is up for re-election. The boundaries, Main Street to Bennington Avenue, Brush Creek to 95th Street.
Your 2 at-large elected officials are Patty Manser, who is up for re-election, and Jennifer Wolfsey.
Again, it's important to note sub-districts that are up for re-election in April 2021 are Sub-District 1, Rita Cortez, Sub-District 3, Manny Abarca, Sub-District 5, Mark Wasserstrom, and the district at-large position currently held by Patty Manson.
Hi, my name is Murray Woodard, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the requirements for running for school board. As we think about the requirements for running for school board, there are important dates we need to remember. Candidate filing begins December 15th, 2020, and December 22nd for districts in Kansas City. Candidate filing ends January 19th, 2021, and the all-important election day is April 6, 2021. The Board of Education, although elected by the registered voters of the local public school district, is a volunteer representative body. The school board governs the school district and provides leadership and advocacy for public education. A school board member must be a U.S. citizen, a resident taxpayer of the district or voters of the district and urban districts, a resident of Missouri for at least 1 year and at least 24 years of age. Candidates must also be current on state and local taxes, have not been found guilty or pled guilty to a felony under Missouri or federal law, are not registered or required to register as a sex offender, and have filed required campaign documents for all previous campaigns, if any. Now, regarding time commitment, board members in most Missouri districts serve 3-year terms. However, board members in independents serve 6-year terms, and board members in Kansas City serve 4 years. If elected, board members must complete 18.5 hours of orientation and training within 1 year of the date they were elected or appointed. Additionally, board members must complete at least 1 hour of refresher training each year thereafter. Now, for additional details, you can visit mosba.org. Hello, everyone. You just had a chance to see the requirements for running for school board. Now I'm excited to bring together this awesome panel of school board members here locally. And I can't state how excited I am to talk to this group. Those of you who all know me know that I truly believe representation matters. And I've been in and around education for a long time, and I've never had the opportunity to interview a full panel of school board members who look like me. And so extremely excited. But before we jump in, and while I try to manage my excitement, I'm gonna do a quick round of introductions. And so I don't know what they look like on your screen and where they are, so I'll just go around first come, first serve on my screen. First up, we have Deron McGee. He's a board member out in Hickman Mills School District. We have Dr. Marvia Jones, board member in Kansas City Public Schools. Megan Marshall, board member out at Lee Summit School District. Beverly Cunningham, the board president at Center School District. And Damon Green, board member out at Grandview School District. And so I just want to jump right in. I know I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you all, and I've been trying to follow the chat, and our participants have a few questions as well. And so we'll jump right in with some of the easy stuff, and then we'll get into some of the deeper, harder questions. And so I just want to start off, and each one of you, if you could share briefly, what motivated you to run for school board? Deron, we'll start with you.
Well, it was actually just a group of people in the community just asked me would I consider it. So we file, I think, like a couple days before Christmas, I think, really. So some folks had asked me to consider it, and this might have been probably in October, and I told them I wasn't really sure at that point. And you know, I'm one of those people that believe if you want to really change the direction of something, you have to get involved. So I did. So I ran and was elected in June of this year.
Awesome. And Megan, you are probably one of the newest school board members. If you could talk a little bit about what motivated you.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. Well, what motivated me was I was coming out of a 20-year career in the Marine Corps being active duty. So I was starting a new chapter in life, and I chose to live in Lee Summit, to make Kansas City my home. And coming out of pretty much my entire adult life as being in the military, you don't really know how not to serve other people. And I knew that whatever I did in my next chapter, it wasn't going to be just sitting down and kind of watching the world go by. I had been a part of many school districts throughout my career and seen how things were done. And when I decided to make Lee Summit my home, an opportunity presented itself, and I had a lot of encouragement from community members, family members, other people that I served with, and a lot of the students really were just really eager to see somebody that looks like them, that understood what they were going through, that wasn't too far removed from school themselves, and really just wanted to get involved at the local level and roll up her sleeves and get in it. So that really just pushed me and gave me the momentum to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring. We filed on Christmas Eve as well. I slept in my car all night just to make sure that my name was first on the ballot, because I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I was serious and ready to do the work.
Thank you. Dr. Jones?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here as well. I was elected in April of 2019 to KCPS board, and I would say that as a public health professional, I read a lot and had been learning a lot about what happens when people don't have access to quality education. Then they show up in my studies with different diseases, heart disease, high blood pressure, violence, all of those things. And so I was really active in my children's um, advocacy for my children. I have two boys. And so I knew that I could be down at the school every day advocating for them and speaking to teachers. But in order to enact broader policy, I'd have to go to a different level to enact change for all students in our district. And so that really drove me to really pursue this office.
Thank you. Beverly.
Good morning, everyone. My why is sort of along the lines of Dr. Jones. I have two children in the Center School District, and they initially were my motivation to be involved. I wanted to be involved with everything in my children's education, and starting with room parent is where I began with my oldest as a kindergartner, and I just kind of went from there. And the natural progression, of course, would be school board. And so through that, wanting to be an advocate for my children, so maybe basically for selfish reasons initially, but through all of that, I realized that I could be an advocate for all children in the district and their families. So it just, I of course had no idea of what all school board entailed, and the satisfaction of being that advocate for our children and families. It just has been really rewarding being a part of the school board. So again, just being able to be an advocate for others.
And Damon.
Yes, thanks. I'm glad to be here. And so I'm a new board member as of April this year. Like Megan, I started a new chapter in my career, and I really was just looking for new opportunities to support the community. I've got a real passion for helping our youth out and succeeding, and I've been a mentor of various capacities. And so I really was just looking to extend my influence in a different way. And so I saw the opening on the school board, after researching it, really seemed like a great opportunity to give back. I'm a stakeholder in the community where I've got children in the district. So, I went on and put my hat, in the bucket, right? And so here I am learning and doing what I can to serve the students of the district and the community.
So for this next question, I want to get the perspective of probably one of our more experienced board members. So Beverly, I'll probably go to you, and then one of our newest board members. What do you all see as the primary work or role of a school board?
Well, number one, and as you are onboarded for school board and the training that you receive, there are various items to check off that list, but number one would be to support your superintendent. And communication, of course, is key there, but being in support of your superintendent just provides for a more cohesive board superintendent relationship. And not to say that you have to agree with everything that your superintendent and their cabinet is doing, because remember, they are the ones that are there doing the work all day, every day. The school board is pretty much there in an advisory capacity, but also to provide input for the superintendent. So I would say number one is to definitely be very supportive and be in communication constantly with your superintendent.
All right. Damon, did you, or Megan, either one of you as our newest board members, do you want to share what you think the primary role is of a school board member? Whichever one
Sure.
you want, you can have it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. the primary role, from my perspective, of a school board member is to govern. That's the reason why you're there, is to govern. And to employ the superintendent, you hire the superintendent. We create policies, update those policies as necessary. And those policies are the guide for their superintendent to carry out what the policies say. And you hold that superintendent accountable for following through on those policies, which may not always be a good relationship. And you have to be able to establish that early, to know that this is where the bar is set, when you're speaking to that superintendent, because us as board members, we're put there by our community. So we represent the collective community of parents and teachers that live in the community and that teach in our schools, and the students. So it is our job to bring their views and what they want for the community they live in, and to create those policies and to modify those and hand it over to the superintendent, and to be supportive of what that superintendent needs to follow through on those policies that we create.
Awesome. This next question I know could be tough, especially in times like this where school boards and superintendents are having to make some really tough decisions. But I'd love to hear from you. What type of relationship, if any, should school board members have with community, and in particular, parents and families? Dr. Jones and Duran, if you could answer that one, it'd be helpful.
Yes, so to piggyback off of what Megan just stated about representing the community, one of the things that I strive to do is to really hear the perspective of parents, knowing that sometimes people can be so overwhelmed and so distracted by just the things in life that they have to get done that they may not always be reaching out, able to take the time to reach out to me personally to let me know what they think. But I think that should be a much closer relationship. I know in my district, I would love to see more engagement with parents, and to let them know that I am their voice. Having children in the district and living where I live, I feel like I get a pretty good, I'm pretty much attuned to those things, but it's nothing really substitutes good parent advocacy.
Duran?
Well, I have never served on the school board prior to my election in June, but in my previous capacity serving in the state legislature, it was a little different because people call your office, they write you letters, they send you emails, and you kind of have this constant communication with the average citizen about stuff you're voting on. It's very different at the school board level because people typically don't follow up with you unless, my experience has been, unless your child is in, needs help or is in trouble. So then that's when you typically hear from the parent. But I would also add to that I think that COVID has made it a lot more difficult to communicate with parents in general. So whereas you used to be able to have an open school board meeting, well, now everything's via Zoom. And that makes things difficult if you have families that don't have adequate internet access or computers and all of that stuff that goes into that. So the advocacy and the connection to your parents and your community is tougher right now just because of the pandemic. One of the things that I think school boards should get in a regular habit of is, I think at least twice a year, I think your school board should host a town hall where, parents can come in and have a cup of coffee and some bacon and eggs and tell you what they think. Because, it's good that you have that kind of communication with people and knowing what's going on with the parents of school districts. And a lot of times, every parent's perception of the district is very unique. It's very different. It's not monolithic. So everybody's view is not the same. So,
yeah. You just raised a great point around COVID and having adequate internet access. Damon, I'm gonna start with you on this one, and then whoever else wants to jump in, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. What is the greatest challenge, or maybe some of the greatest challenges facing education that school boards are grappling with right now? And it might not be the same given the fact that you all are in different districts, but I would imagine there's some overlap and some synergy there. So Damon, could you start, and then whoever wants to jump in, feel free.
Yeah, sure. First of all, let me say, I believe that our educators are essential, and I appreciate everything that they're doing in our schools to help teach our children. I mean, the elephant in the room right now is the pandemic. It's created challenges, with regards to safety, the learning curriculum, mental health, and a host of others. For many students, classrooms are closed, right? And, they're closed for safety reasons. And that just leaves, a virtual learning option as the alternative. And that virtual alternative is failing many students, right? And so with that is taking a toll on their mental health as well as parents and teachers. From a perspective of school boards, some are parents like me, so the challenge is very similar. We're seeing tough, decisions having to be made. And as board members, that causes conflict with many parents and teachers. But, as a collective board, we discuss those issues and we support the superintendent where, it's in the best interest of the student. So, I mean, there's a host of issues around COVID is just making this situation a lot more difficult, for us. Parents still have to work. Our children that are, K through 5, especially, to me, need that personal instruction and intention, from the teachers. And, when they're left at home during the day with siblings or whatnot, sometimes it just becomes very burdensome. And so we're losing a lot of, academic progress with respect to that particular problem.
Thank you. If anyone has anything different to add, I think Dr. Jones, you just put yourself off mute, so I'd love to hear your perspective.
No, it's not that much different. I would just add to what Damon was saying about, we have a lot of community spread right now. And if you're a school district that is using gating criteria that is based on the rate of positivity in the community, what we're seeing is that the zip codes that have always been hardest hit by everything are also hardest hit by COVID-19. And so that's creating, to me, like an extra layer of inequity where you're saying, well, because these areas that this district serves have been so impacted by COVID-19, we can't go back. So this is one more way that inequality and inequities are playing out in our education landscape.
All right, thank you. And speaking of inequities, our attendees were presented with some data from DESE that show glaring achievement gaps across our entire educational system. More importantly, the gap between white students and our Black, Latino, and low-income students. And this was regardless of location, regardless of urban versus suburban, district versus charter, the gaps persisted. So I do have a couple questions around that, but the first thing that I want to know is, how are you as board members working to hold your districts accountable to addressing those gaps? And any one of you, I know it's a tough question, but either one of you that want to jump in, Dr. Jones, or particularly Megan, I think it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that one.
Yes. So as a board member, one of 7, my specific action that I do is I ask those tough questions when we have, whether it's hiring that comes up for decision and for discussion. And I think it's important that to include the rest of my colleagues in those conversations, because it's not just me. Just because I'm that one face on the board who doesn't look like everybody else, it's not just my job to ask those questions. This is a collective interest, and we in our district, we have centered our board priorities. Our first board priority is around equity and using an equity lens in every single thing that we do. So it's not just touching on the academic inequities, it's also touching on the contracts that we give out and that we accept for people who are doing work in our schools and who are building, new middle schools that we have going up and things we have going on in the future. So it's important to ask those specific questions and be bold about it with the rest of your colleagues, the superintendent, and those that work under him, to ask those questions so they know that this is how they need to be minded when they're making these decisions. And you also need to, as well as a new board member too, you have to be able to dig really deep and understand the history of your district and how you got to where you are now. Because academic inequities didn't just come up, recently. This been here for, it's been here for a while. This is a whole history from the beginning of how many school districts started, especially in the suburbs. So understanding where you came from, it gives you a better picture so that along the way, as you're trying to close those gaps and address those inequities, you're educating people along the way, because you don't want to fall back into it, because our term is only 3 years, right? So we want to make sure that we set some type of strong foundation for those that come after us so that they can move the ball forward, and you kind of just, you don't get stuck in time or you go backwards if no one's, paying attention.
Deron, I saw you jump off mute. Did you have a response?
Yeah, so I just want to follow up to Megan's point. I think she's absolutely right about holding the administration accountable in terms of, the typical board members. I mean, everybody wants to hold their administration accountable for test scores. I mean, that's sort of the driving force, because that's sort of the stick and the carrot, right? Because the state, all they care about is test scores. That's what DESE cares about, is everybody, that's the whole thing. Everybody's trying to prepare for the test scores at the end of the year. But I would also say is how you get there. And I think that's important. We've got to make sure that we have the best qualified teachers in the classroom, and also making sure that we value those teachers to stay there, and making sure you can compensate teachers. That's, as many parents are finding out during COVID, being a teacher is a tough job. And it is hard. I have friends that have 2 and 3 kids at home virtually, and they're ready to put their kids out. Imagine if you do that times 30. And so it's a tough job. And I think that it's really important that as school board members, that we really advocate that we give our teachers all the tools that they need, and that they're adequately compensated to do this job that's really important, because good teachers are hard to find. And when you find them, you want to keep them in the district, because we know consistently is good. And that's what's going to help kids catch up. As you were talking about earlier, that 80% proficiency, that's how you're going to find that, is by having those teachers. Because, if you're a low paying school district, they're going to get their experience and they're going to leave. And so you want to try to keep teachers there. And it's important that you find teachers in minority school districts that look like them. I think that's very, very important. And so I think that we have to look at that as you talk about test scores and the inadequacies in that, and in terms of kids that are behind. We really got to make sure that we're giving the teachers their tools. And we're finding out during COVID that is a much tougher job than people have been led to believe in years past.
All right. So you all named a couple of challenges facing education and school boards. I do have a question. Most school boards meet once or twice a month, right? And so there's no way you could tackle every one of those challenges. How do you, as school board members, or how should school boards decide what's most important and what they should focus on?
I can start with that question. My response to that is, if it's important for the kids, then it should be a priority. We, as a school board, have to focus on what is going to provide the best opportunity for our children to succeed. So whether that be additional resources provided to the kids, and again, to Deron's point, with COVID and being able to navigate, the teachers being able to pivot is the word everyone is using these days, but to be able to pivot and make sure that learning strategies we're up with learning strategies, and how to be able to make sure that the kids are getting what it is they need. Being in a traditional classroom and providing feedback it's different right now. So, teachers can't do that, but to provide teachers with creative ways to be able to do that in order for the kids to be successful, that is definitely what we as a board should be able to, or try to focus on, to be able to relay that to the superintendent and staff, to be able to support them in that and encourage that right now, how, how difficult it is. And I have, well, one in high school, but the same thing, I'm doing what I can as a parent to support my child. But then also, if the teachers, if there is anything that, that is difficult for them, they should be able to reach out to their staff, administrators, and let them know. And then in turn, they be provided with whatever it is they need to ensure that the child is learning at the best. So
Yeah, I would say that, to kind of piggyback over Beverly's comments, you kind of know that there are different people on your board, on your 7-member board. There are people who have different priorities. I might know that 2 of my colleagues are really interested in operations. These colleagues are interested in enrollment and increasing enrollment in marketing. My other colleague might be interested in something else. I know that for me, I'm a root causes person. I know I'm thinking about health and wellness and mental well-being. I know that discipline is something that's really big for me. And so that has been kind of my lane for the past several months. It's really, especially now that we're in kind of a holding pattern with virtual learning, how do we gear up for when we go back? And so thinking about how we handle discipline, I'm blessed to have an administration that has, for whom discipline and equity and discipline has been important for some time. And so my goal has been to keep it at the forefront and move it along so that we're not just talking and looking at the data anymore, but we're actually enacting policies that will say, hey, you can't suspend children. You can't suspend children who are in pre-K, up to 3rd grade. We know nationally that that's not healthy. And we know that those children are at higher risk. People who have experienced suspensions, especially chronic suspension, those children are more at higher risk of dropout, death, incarceration, all of that. And we know that it can be traced back to that. It's not just a ancillary kind of factor on the side. And so I think really determining what is not being discussed, what are you passionate about that is important for the well-being of students, that's one way to kind of find your main goal. I care about teachers and retention and recruitment and all of those things, and I will advocate for those as well. But when I think about what am I always making sure gets moved along, it's going to be that equity and discipline.
And I'd love to continue this all day if we could, but for time, we're getting close to the end here. So I have one question that popped up in our comments around student voice, and then I'll get to a final question for our attendees. They had a question around student voice, so I have one quick question around that. When, if at any time at all, do board members get a chance to get and hear student voice or students' perspectives? And if we could just popcorn real quick.
I'll go first. I make it a point to get student voice every opportunity that I can, whether they're emailing me or I go to where they are and utilize their voices. I talk to different groups. The students have their own different student unions and different organizations and different clubs, and I make it my business to go and seek them out and hear what they have to say. I don't necessarily wait for them to come to me, because I want to know what they're thinking, and we have honest conversations from high schoolers all the way down to the younger ones who, can express to their best of their ability what they're, most of it, they just want more recess or something like that when we're in school. But I actively go seek their opinions.
my experience with that has been sporting events, and mainly the high school. But Megan, I think that's absolutely fabulous that you even include, the younger ones, because they know a lot. I think, and it's been said, little kids, they know more and feel more and have more of opinions than what we give them credit for. But for me, it's sporting events. So anytime I'm able to talk to a kid or, just go up to them and ask them. And a lot of them I do know, personally. So I think having a relationship also makes it a little bit easier to have those conversations, but just to be able to ask them, how's it going? And for them, which is always good, for them to be comfortable enough with me to come up to me to ask a question or ask, to provide some input.
All right. I'm a little nervous about asking this final question because I don't want you to say don't do it, but several of our attendees are interested in running for school board. So in 20 seconds or less, what advice would you give to our attendees today about running a successful, either running a successful campaign or being a highly effective school board member? Duran, if you want to go first.
So this would have been pre-COVID. I would have told anybody wanting to run for any office, be prepared to, really put yourself out there in terms of, going to community events, going door to door. Obviously, that's not happening because of COVID. So you have to rethink how you campaign in a sort of post-COVID way. I'm not sure that for this next April election that many folks will be away from that. So I think you're going to have to think outside the box in the way you contact people and you can campaign. But I would say, really, if you really want to run for office, and particularly the school board, you really got to make it a priority. It can't be just something you're interested in, kind of like a passing fad. It's got to be something that you really want to do, because once you get elected, it just requires a lot of time and it is a volunteer position. So you kind of really want to have to be there. And so that's really, and that to me is like the most important thing, is really putting forth the effort to campaign for the office, because it's kind of emblematic of the time that it takes once you get elected. So.
Damon?
Yeah, I agree with everything Duran said. The pandemic has really changed things, but my advice would just be start reviewing various resources out there and get started now. I think the electronic filing is later this month, ends late January. You'll need to organize a committee, recruit yourself a finance manager and start raising money for the campaign. So, and then, on voting day, get your camp out there to help you pass out the materials. And, I know the Missouri Ethics Commission has a website that really contains a lot of information to kind of guide you through that process. So just start looking at it. And, like Darren said, be ready for what you're going to get into. There are some hours that you need to make a good commitment for. There are some additional subcommittees that you may be a part of. So make sure that you got the time. You're really enthusiastic about doing it, and, come join the team.
And Murray, I would simply add to, unlike one particular district that saves you a little time, you don't have to go out and get signatures. So that does save you a tad bit of time.
Well, you do in others. So, Dr. Jones, we'll go Dr. Jones, Megan Marshall, then Beverly Cunningham. You can bring us home.
Real quick, I would say just know in advance and ask yourself whether you can live with the fact that it's not going to be the you show. So if you are successful, you make it on, you're not going to be able to be successful as an island. You are going to have to be a team player and someone who can build relationships with your other colleagues. If you believe you're just going to be able to get in and get your thing done because that's what you want, and everybody better just fall in line, you will not be successful, and so you won't represent your people well.
All right, I'm gonna start my timer, Murray. Let me use every bit of that 20 seconds you gave. The first bit of advice I would give to anybody that's thinking about being a candidate, that especially is here watching this, do it. Do it. There's no time like the present. I know a lot of people say, well, I wonder how it fits with this. Everything will work itself out. If you know your why and you have that passion, then do it. File, become a candidate, and realize that your work starts before you even file. While you're sitting here now thinking if you should even do it, you should already be organizing in your head and creating that community around yourself, around your why and what the community wants to see. And also realize that as a candidate, that's not what it looks like as a board member. So keep that into perspective, because the candidacy and the campaign is only for a certain amount of time. So keeping that in mind as you go into it, you also have to be your work ethic has to be tremendous, because you have to be able to display to the community that you are going to work this hard for them as a board member. So whether you have to get creative during the campaign with, how you door knock, whether you stand on the street and project your voice, or however, there's ways to do it, and you can get creative in getting your word out and connecting with the community. So I would say, don't second guess yourself, do it, and the community will rally around you for the right reasons, and hard work pays off.
Well, I would say to wind that all up, and I guess I'm the senior member here. I don't know how I feel about that, but I would say every piece of advice that each one of these individuals have given you, absolutely excellent advice and so true. The campaign versus actually being on the board is totally different. So with that, I would say, don't make promises that you cannot keep, because you are not the school board. You, along with 6 other individuals who have 6 different varying opinions, make up the school board. And with that, I would say you need to be willing to work with people who you're not always going to agree with, you're not always going to get along with. And that definitely is difficult. But if you're thinking about it, like Megan said, go for it. Go for it. Do it. Be the representative that we need. Go ahead and take that leap and do the best you can. You have resources, I believe, and hopefully so. All of our information will be out there, if you have questions. But yeah, go for it. Help us succeed.
Thank you. I just want to personally thank each one of you for your time today. I want to thank you for serving on the school boards, and thank you for being an example for our babies. And I just want to say to the attendees, I was really excited to not only facilitate this school board discussion because I love talking education, but because I love talking to educators that represent and reflect our students. And so with that being said, you're now in the hands of one of our parents for a call to action. Thank you.
Good day. I'm excited to be here with you today as you learn about this school governance process. My name is Spark Bookhart. I'm the convener of the Parent Power Lab. And the Parent Power Lab is simply a collection of parents that have come together to organize around creating world-class schools. We understand that the importance and the power of the parent voice. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like completely ignored when it came to your child or your children in schools? Or have you ever felt that you had to act a complete fool in order to be heard when it comes to your children or your child in school? I know I have. I've been in that situation. And when it's your child or when it's your children, it seems justified. You want answers. You need to understand what's going on. You will go to the end of the earth for your child or for your children. And I completely understand that. But let me just talk for just a few minutes about why this moment is so important and why it's so urgent. I believe, and it is my contention, that parents are the most important factor in creating world-class schools. It's the most important factor. In fact, you can't show me a world-class school or world-class school system that's void of significant parent input and engagement. It just doesn't exist. Unfortunately, in this region, parents are the most ignored factor when it comes to creating world-class schools. We try everything all the time, year after year after year, ad nauseum, but no one has taken a serious and concerted effort into bringing the parent voice into the conversation in a significant, strong, and important way. unfortunately, parents are looked at as individuals. Parents are looked at as individuals, and that is because they are totally disorganized. It is my belief that when parents understand that they are the most important component in creating world-class schools and actually take their place at the table as a participant in creating world-class schools, then and only then will we get world-class schools. This really is our time. More so now than any time in recent history, we have stable governance for the most part in our school districts, our school systems in the region. However, we have perhaps the worst outcomes that we've had in recent history for students in this district, particularly Black and brown students in the Kansas City region. So what we need, just like you're doing today, is we need parents to be engaged in the process of creating world-class school. And what that is you putting your talents to bear. The school systems are vast, but guess what? Parent talents are vast as well. And we need your talents to bring to bear on creating a world-class school system, one that we can all be proud of. And we need your talents everywhere from the school board all the way down to your individual child's homework and everywhere in between. Then, and only then, will we be in a position to create world-class schools. And guess what? It cannot be done without parents. And it can't be done with just a few strong parents. Trust me, if that could have been done, I would have done it a long time ago. But I thank you for being here. I implore you to get involved in organizing with parents, whether it be through BLAQUE. You can always contact me at spark@parentpowerlab.com, and we will take this time that we have right now and create world-class schools from it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoy the remainder of your training.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first event for BLAQUE Kansas City, and boy, was it a treat. I just want to hope that you all felt challenged a little bit, inspired, supported, and motivated to not only stand as allies with BLAQUE KC, but to fully engage in our educational system as we change the odds for kids that so desperately need our help. A couple of announcements as we get ready to close out. First, for those of you who are excited and want to run for office, BLAQUE will be hosting a 2.5-day deep dive on the mechanics of running a campaign. We have 2 tracks, one for candidates and one for campaigners. That's your campaign managers, your data people, your volunteers. Now, our space is limited. We're taking 10 slots for candidates and 10 slots for campaigners. You will find more information and the actual application on our Facebook page. If you register through Eventbrite, we will email that out to you as well. Again, that will be January 15th, 16th, and 17th, and that will expose you to national and local trainers that have been successful in helping candidates run really great campaigns. So that's the first thing I want to highlight. The second thing I want to highlight is that April 6th is the election. You will hear us talk time and time again about that date. We want you to, for those who have to get signatures from file committees, we want to make sure that you feel that you are supported. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the superintendents that donated their time. Thank you to hearing a parent voice. And thank you to the school board members that were willing to be vulnerable and transparent, and who also will make their emails available to you if you have any questions. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. God bless you and thank you.